4 true stories of weekend getaways gone horribly wrong. Welcome to DTC, Dark Timeless Creeps, where the darkness of the unknown comes alive. In today's video, we bring you 4 terrifying true weekend getaway horror stories that will chill you to the bone. Whether it's a haunted cabin, a mysterious figure lurking in the woods, or the unexplainable events that unfold when you least expect them, these real-life encounters will make you think twice before booking your next escape. Sit back, turn off the lights, and prepare for a journey into the eerie unknown. Story 1. The Whispers of Maine. I'll never forget that trip to Maine. It changed me in ways I can never fully explain. A week-long getaway with my best friends Greg, Jay, and Mark. It started like any other trip, but it ended in a nightmare that still haunts me to this day. It all began with something simple, something that didn't seem important at the time. Little inconveniences like losing my football cap and pen. I never thought that something as trivial as that could lead to the horrifying events that followed. Greg's family had a secret summer house on a remote island off the coast of Maine, a place where few people ever went. The kind of place where you could leave everything behind. The world, the noise, the chaos, and just relax. It seemed perfect. We were all excited. We packed our bags, hopped into the car, and took the long drive through winding roads, dense forests, and over quiet streams. The air smelled different, crisp and untouched, and the further we went, the more isolated it felt. When we arrived, the house looked just like I'd imagined. Old, wooden, and weathered, standing alone at the edge of the island, surrounded by thick trees. It had a strange aura about it, like something was hidden beneath its surface. The house creaked and groaned as if it were alive, and when night fell, the place felt eerily silent, unnervingly so. But we were young, we were carefree, and we brushed off any strange feelings as part of the atmosphere. The first day passed without incident, save for a few small annoyances. I lost my favorite football cap and pen, 2 things I thought I'd never find again, but they didn't seem that important at the time. We spent the day exploring the house, the island, and the surrounding forests. Everything felt fine, even though the silence of the place was unsettling. We joked about how quiet it was, how removed from the world we felt. But that night, something changed. I was lying in bed, half awake, trying to drift off to sleep when I heard it. A soft whisper, barely audible, like a breath being exhaled right next to my ear. It didn't seem like it came from anywhere specific, just the air itself. It was a voice, my name, whispering in the darkness. I froze. My heart thumped in my chest. I tried to shake it off as my imagination running wild, but then it came again, louder this time, clearer. I turned slowly, my eyes scanning the room. Mark, Jay, and Greg were all asleep, their breathing steady, undisturbed. But Mark was the one who caught my attention. He was lying in his bed, staring blankly at the ceiling. His eyes were wide open, but there was something strange in his gaze. Something distant. It was as if he was listening to something I couldn't hear. I didn't investigate further. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, pretending I didn't hear the whispers. I should have gotten up. I should have checked to see what was going on, but something in the air made me feel paralyzed. The next morning, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. That night, I'd heard something, and I knew I wasn't just imagining it. But the weirdness didn't end there. The next morning, we were all having breakfast when I noticed Mark standing by the second-floor window, staring out into the thick woods. The thing is, the house didn't have a second-floor bathroom. It was strange that Mark had been up there at all. I asked him about it, but he just stared at me blankly, as if he hadn't heard me. He said nothing for a moment and then just walked away, leaving me unsettled. And then there was the disappearance of my belongings, again. I had put my football cap and pen in a drawer, but the next morning they were gone. I checked everywhere. I even asked the guys if they'd seen them, but they hadn't. Then I found them, inside Mark's bag. He hadn't said a word about it. At that point, I started to feel a little more than uneasy, but it didn't stop there. One night, while searching through Mark's room to see if he had taken anything else, I found a small black notebook hidden under his mattress. When I opened it, my stomach dropped. The pages were filled with disturbing drawings, dark, violent images that seemed to be alive on the page. Demonic faces, nightmarish creatures, bloodied scenes that made my skin crawl. And then in the back, written in a hurried scrawl, was a drawing of a face that looked like mine. But it wasn't me. It was a distorted version of me, twisted in a grotesque way. I couldn't keep it to myself any longer. I went to Greg's dad and showed him the notebook, telling him everything that had been happening. I thought maybe he could help, but by the time he came to the house, it was too late. The trip ended abruptly. Greg's dad packed us up and we left the island without a word. We didn't even look back. I didn't know what was happening, but I felt like we were running away from something we couldn't escape. When I got home, I was a wreck. I couldn't explain what had happened. I couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed me. That night I received a strange phone call. The voice on the other end was muffled, almost like static, but then it became clear. Mark's voice, whispering, calling my name. Days later, I got an envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside was my football cap, the one I had lost, and next to it, the black notebook. But this time, there was something new. At the very back of the book was a final drawing. It was a picture of me standing alone in the woods, with Mark's eyes staring back at me from the shadows. I knew then that Mark wasn't just missing. He was still out there, watching me, waiting. Years passed, but I never forgot that trip to Maine. Every now and then I'll hear a whisper, a faint sound that chills me to the bone. I don't know what happened to Mark. Maybe he's still out there somewhere, waiting for me. Or maybe he never left. And one day, when I least expect it, he'll find me again. I don't know how he did it, how he got to me after all this time. But I know one thing, I'll never be free of that trip. The whispers of Maine will never leave me. Do you dare to listen to the dark? If tonight's tale gave you chills, let us know your thoughts in the comments. We want to hear what creeps you out and what other stories you'd love us to explore. Don't miss out on the next terrifying story. Subscribe to DTC Dark Timeless Creeps and join the family that thrives on the unknown. Tap the notification bell so you're the first to hear every spine-chilling tale. Share this video with someone brave enough to face the darkness, and let's dive deeper into the creeps that haunt our world. Comment below and become part of the terror. The darkness is calling, and we want you with us. Story 2. The family game went wrong. Have you ever participated in a game only to realize a minute in that you're trapped in a nightmare from which you can't wake up? If not, then buckle up, because this story will make you think twice about signing up for any strange activities in the middle of nowhere, especially in the dead of winter. This happened to me, and trust me, it's not something I'll ever forget. It all started a few years ago, one cold winter, when my family decided to take our annual trip to the remote forests of Vermont. We're a family that loves unusual games and adventurous activities, and this year was no different. This time, we were going to play a laser tag game in the woods, but not your usual backyard fun. We were given industrial-grade laser guns, and the goal was to shoot the other players in a vast, dark forest. I was ecstatic. I mean, who wouldn't be excited to finally get to play with real laser guns? But that excitement quickly turned to dread as the game took a twisted turn. At first, everything seemed fine. The air was crisp. The snow-covered trees looked beautiful against the backdrop of a cloudy sky. I was ready, my gun in hand, heart pounding with excitement. But there was something about the forest, The way it swallowed sound, the eerie quiet that filled the air, that immediately set my nerves on edge. The woods felt wrong. It was as if the trees themselves were watching us, listening to our every step. But I brushed it off. It was just the isolation and the cold making me feel uneasy. As we ventured deeper into the forest, things started to get weirder. I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I glanced over my shoulder, trying to catch a glimpse of my family members, but all I could see were shadows moving through the dense trees. Suddenly, I heard something that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. A twig snapped underfoot. But it wasn't one of my family members. It was too loud, too deliberate. I froze. I couldn't see anyone, but the feeling that someone or something was watching me grew stronger. I wasn't alone. I wasn't imagining it. Someone or something was out there in the shadows, waiting. I turned my head quickly, scanning the trees, but all I saw was a flicker of movement in the distance. It wasn't one of us. It wasn't anyone from my family. I couldn't explain it, but my gut told me I wasn't just being paranoid, I was being hunted. I tried to tell myself it was part of the game, that maybe one of the other players was sneaking up on me, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. As I walked deeper into the forest, I noticed something that sent a chill down my spine. Strange footprints, smaller than anyone else's in the group. The tracks didn't match the boots everyone was wearing. These were lighter, almost delicate, as if someone or something was moving swiftly through the snow, trying to stay hidden. My heart raced, and just as I was about to call out to one of my relatives, I heard a rustling sound from behind. I whipped around, but no one was there. Yet the sound continued, closer now. I could feel the presence like a shadow stalking me. I was being followed. Then, out of nowhere, I heard the unmistakable sound of a laser gun firing. Close, too close. My blood ran cold. I realized in that instant that I wasn't just being watched, I was being pursued. Whoever was out there, they weren't part of the game. They weren't part of my family. I had to get out. I broke into a full sprint, adrenaline pumping through my veins. My breath came in ragged gasps, my heart pounding in my chest. Every step I took, I could hear the faintest echo of footsteps behind me. Was it them? Was it the other players? Or was it something far worse? I didn't dare look back. I could hear the crackle of another laser shot in the distance, and I knew that whoever was chasing me wasn't going to stop until they caught me. I ran and ran, not knowing where I was heading, just desperately trying to escape. But the snow beneath me was soft and slippery, and every time I tried to push myself harder, my legs felt like they were sinking deeper. My mind screamed for me to keep going, but I was exhausted. My thoughts were scattered, my vision blurry. And then, just as I thought I was done for, I stumbled into an open area. I dared a glance over my shoulder. Nothing. No footsteps, no sounds, just the cold emptiness of the forest. But I didn't stop running. I kept going, not looking back, until I saw the familiar shape of my family members ahead. Relief flooded my chest. They were there, standing in the snow, waiting for me. I rushed over to them, my breathing frantic. But when I looked into their faces, something was off. They didn't seem surprised to see me. No questions, no concern, just blank stares. They were staring at me, but it wasn't like the usual family look. It was cold, distant. I took a step back, confusion bubbling up. Why weren't they reacting? The sound of something heavy dragging through the snow. A figure emerged from the trees, tall and hulking, covered in snow. At first I thought it was just a man in a snowsuit, but then I saw it clearly. It wasn't human, not completely. A towering figure, a snowman, stood there in the clearing, its massive form glistening with ice and snow. But it wasn't just a snowman. It was holding something in its hand, a laser gun, a real one, the very same model we had been using, and it was pointing it right at us. Panic surged through me. I could hear my heart pounding in my ears. What the hell was going on? Was this part of the game? But no, this wasn't a joke. This wasn't fun. This wasn't anything I had prepared for. Lucian, my cousin, was the first to act. Without thinking, he pulled out his gun and fired at the snowman. The shot rang out, echoing through the cold air. We all waited, holding our breath. But there was no reaction, no fall, no scream, nothing. The snowman stood there frozen as if nothing had happened. The more we stared, the less real it all seemed. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but no one spoke. No one knew what was going on. It was as if we were stuck in some kind of twisted game we couldn't escape. And then, just like that, it was over. The snowman was still standing there, lifeless, staring back at us with its empty eyes. No one said a word as we turned and left the clearing, our hearts still racing, minds racing faster, trying to piece together what had just happened. But I know this now. Some games are meant to stay unplayed. Some things once seen can never be forgotten. And if you ever find yourself in the woods, alone, with the sound of footsteps behind you, don't run, because there's a chance, a very real chance, that it's already too late. Do you dare to listen to the dark? If tonight's tale gave you chills, let us know your thoughts in the comments. We want to hear what creeps you out and what other stories you'd love us to explore. Don't miss out on the next terrifying story. Subscribe to DTC Dark Timeless Creeps and join the family that thrives on the unknown. Tap the notification bell so you're the first to hear every spine-chilling tale. Share this video with someone brave enough to face the darkness, and let's dive deeper into the creeps that haunt our world. Comment below and become part of the terror. The darkness is calling, and we want you with us. Story 3, The Horrifying Airbnb Weekend Getaway. It was supposed to be the perfect weekend getaway, a chance to escape the mundane routine of daily life and spend a relaxing few days with friends. My name is character's name, and I had invited my close friends, Allie, Leah, and Calvin, to join me for a spring break retreat. We decided to rent an isolated Airbnb cabin nestled deep in the woods of Lake County, California. The place seemed ideal for a quiet, peaceful retreat, far from the noise and chaos of city life. The booking description had promised serenity, a cozy retreat in nature, and we were all looking forward to unwinding. The drive to the cabin, though, was cramped and uncomfortable. We were squeezed into my small car for hours, the anticipation of reaching our destination the only thing keeping our spirits up. But as we neared the cabin, the excitement returned. The trees grew taller, the roads thinner, and soon we were surrounded by thick, dense woods. It felt like we were heading deeper into the heart of a forgotten world, far removed from everything we knew. When we arrived, the cabin looked as quaint and peaceful as we expected. It was a rustic wooden house surrounded by towering trees with large windows that offered a beautiful view of the forest. The quietness of the place was almost eerie, but in a comforting way, nothing but the sound of distant birds and the occasional rustling of leaves. It was a little strange, though. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but there was an unusual stillness in the air, almost like the forest itself was holding its breath. The first night passed without incident. We cooked dinner together, laughed, and enjoyed a peaceful evening by the fireplace. It felt like the perfect getaway. But that sense of calm quickly began to fade when the first strange occurrence happened the following night. It started with faint noises, soft footsteps that we could hear even though no one else was supposed to be in the cabin. The creaking of the floorboards. A door opening and closing though we hadn't touched it. Allie and Leah brushed it off as the house settling, or perhaps just the wind playing tricks on us. But I could feel it. The atmosphere was changing. The air felt heavier, and there was an undeniable sense that something wasn't quite right. It was around midnight when Allie, ever the adventurer, suggested we go outside. "Let's sit on the porch for a bit," she said, a playful smile on her face. Despite feeling uneasy, I agreed, and we stepped outside into the cold night air. The moon was hidden behind the clouds, and everything around us was pitch black, the only light coming from the faint glow of lanterns on the front porch. It felt oddly quiet, like the entire forest had gone silent. No animals, no wind, just the oppressive stillness of the night. While Allie and I sat outside, Calvin and Leia stayed inside, trying to relax. But then I noticed something out of the corner of my eye, a shadow. At first I thought it was just a trick of the light, but when I looked again, it was still there. A figure, tall and thin, standing at the edge of the trees just beyond the cabin. It wasn't a person. The shape was wrong, too distorted to be human. I blinked, trying to convince myself that it was just a trick of the mind. But no matter how hard I tried, the figure remained. I turned to Allie, but when I looked back, the shadow was gone. My heart began to race, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something or someone was watching us. Allie came back inside a little while later, her face pale, her eyes wide and unfocused. She didn't say anything at first, but when I asked if she was okay, she only nodded. I could tell something was off. Something had spooked her, but she didn't want to admit it. I tried to brush it off, but my mind was racing. The sense of unease was overwhelming now, and I couldn't ignore it. As the night wore on, the strange occurrences grew more frequent. The noises became louder, dragging sounds like furniture being moved, and faint whispers that seemed to echo from the walls. Every time we checked the rooms, they were empty. No one was there. But the unsettling feeling lingered. It was as if the house itself was alive, breathing, watching us. And with every passing hour, the feeling of dread grew stronger. The next day, I decided to do some research on the cabin to see if there were any warnings I might have missed. After all, we had booked it through Airbnb, and surely there must be some history or explanation for what was happening. When I revisited the listing, I noticed a line I had somehow overlooked earlier. "This place is not for the faint of heart." At the time, it seemed like an exaggeration, but now it felt like a warning. That night, the fear truly began to set in. We tried to stay calm, but everything felt wrong. The sounds, the shadows, the sense of being watched. It was all becoming unbearable. At one point, while trying to sleep, I felt something cold brush against my skin. I woke up to find a figure standing at the foot of my bed. It was not one of us. It wasn't even human. It was tall, its eyes dark and hollow, and as I stared at it in terror, it slowly began to fade into the darkness. I couldn't move. My body was frozen, trapped in a state of fear I couldn't escape. I told Allie and Leah what I had seen, but they dismissed it, thinking it was just a nightmare or my mind playing tricks on me. But I knew what I had seen. This wasn't normal. This was something far darker. As the hours passed, the tension between us grew. Calvin and Leah insisted on leaving, but the weather had turned and the roads were too dangerous to travel. So we stayed, hoping that the next morning would bring some relief. But by dawn, the situation had worsened. The whispers were no longer just whispers. They were voices calling our names, coming from the darkness. And worse, there were marks on the walls, scratched deep into the wood, as if something had been clawing its way through the house. The final straw came when we decided to leave in the morning, but when we opened the front door, the world outside had changed. The familiar path leading back to the car was gone. The forest had closed in, and all we could see were towering, twisted trees, as if the very landscape itself had shifted overnight. We were trapped. I could feel the presence of something else, something ancient and hungry, watching us from the shadows. We left the cabin that day without looking back, but the horrors we experienced in that place didn't stay behind. They followed us home, lingering in the corners of our minds, in the whispers that never truly stopped. I tried to forget, tried to convince myself it was just a bad experience, a freak accident, but deep down, I knew better. The house, the woods, the darkness, it was all real. And it wasn't done with us. When I checked the Airbnb listing again after we left, the warning had been removed. No trace of the message, nothing to suggest the cabin had a history, nothing to explain the terror we had experienced. But I couldn't shake the feeling that we were never meant to leave that place. And that thought still haunts me. Sometimes late at night when I'm alone, I can hear faint whispers in the distance, and I wonder if the house is calling me back. Do you dare to listen to the dark? If tonight's tale gave you chills, let us know your thoughts in the comments. We want to hear what creeps you out and what other stories you'd love us to explore. Don't miss out on the next terrifying story. Subscribe to DTC Dark Timeless Creeps and join the family that thrives on the unknown. Tap the notification bell so you're the first to hear every spine-chilling tale. Share this video with someone brave enough to face the darkness, and let's dive deeper into the creeps that haunt our world. Comment below and become part of the terror. The darkness is calling, and we want you with us. Story 4, The Haunted Cabin in the Forest, a true weekend horror story. I never imagined a simple weekend getaway could change my life forever. A few friends and I, Jess, Mark, Lisa, and Tom, decided to get away from the hustle and bustle of city life. We wanted to escape into nature, relax, and reconnect. So, we found this secluded cabin deep in the woods, far away from civilization. The idea seemed perfect. No cell phone service, no distractions, just pure peace and quiet. Little did we know, the silence would become more suffocating than comforting. The cabin was nestled deep in the forest, miles away from the nearest town. The trees were dense, and the air felt heavy with stillness. It seemed like the perfect place to unwind. The drive there was long, and as we arrived, the cabin appeared even more isolated than we anticipated. The building was old, with walls made of rough-hewn wood, and the windows were covered in a thick layer of fog, as though they had been untouched for years. Despite its rustic charm, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. There was a coldness to the air, despite the fact that the weather was mild. At first I tried to ignore it. I thought I was just tired from the long journey. But there was something about the atmosphere that set my nerves on edge. It wasn't just the creaky floorboards or the smell of mildew in the corners. It was a presence, something intangible but undeniably there. That night, as we sat around the fire in the living room, telling stories and playing cards, the house seemed to come alive. First, it was the faint sound of footsteps, just a soft shuffle, barely audible. But then the sound started to grow. A few minutes later, there was a soft giggle, barely a whisper, but it was enough to make my skin crawl. It wasn't the laughter of any of us, it was something else, something off. "Did you hear that?" Jess asked, her voice trembling. I saw the fear in her eyes as she scanned the dark corners of the room. We all paused, listening, but the house was eerily quiet again. "That's just the house settling," Mark said, trying to sound reassuring, but even he didn't seem convinced. Then it happened. Jess shot up from her seat, her face pale. "Someone's outside. I saw them, right by the window." We all rushed to the window, peering out into the dark forest, but there was nothing there. No sign of movement, no one in sight, just trees, shadows, and the blackness of the night. It was unsettling, to say the least. But we shrugged it off, trying to enjoy the rest of the evening. I wanted to believe it was just our minds playing tricks on us, that maybe Jess had mistaken a shadow for a person. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. That night, as I lay in bed, I had my first strange dream. It was always the same dream, a woman in a long white dress standing outside the cabin. Her face was pale, and her eyes were black, dark, empty voids that seemed to stare into my soul. She didn't speak. She just stood there, waiting. When I woke up, I felt a chill run down my spine. I thought it was just the remnants of the nightmare, but the feeling lingered. I tried to ignore it, convinced it was just my imagination. But as the days passed, the dreams became more vivid. The woman would appear outside the cabin, always the same, silent, still, and watching. Each time I woke up, the unease grew stronger. I began to notice things in the cabin that I hadn't before, little things like the way the windows always seemed to fog up, no matter how much we wiped them, or how the floor creaked underfoot, even when no one was near. Then, on the last night, everything took a terrifying turn. I woke up in the middle of the night, my heart pounding in my chest. It wasn't the kind of fear you feel when you wake up from a bad dream. It was different. It felt like someone was in the room with me. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. Slowly, I turned my head, and what I saw made my blood run cold. Outside the window, there she was, just like in my dreams, the woman in the white dress. Her face was still as pale as death, her eyes black as coal, staring directly into mine. She didn't move, didn't blink. She just stood there, watching. My breath caught in my throat, and I tried to scream, but no sound came out. I couldn't move. I couldn't even close my eyes. I was trapped, locked in place by an unseen force. When I finally managed to break free of the paralysis, I leapt out of bed, grabbed my things, and ran out of the room, frantic. I woke the others, and without saying a word, we gathered our belongings and left, abandoned everything in that cursed cabin. I didn't care about the clothes we left behind or the things we had brought. I just needed to get out of there. As we sped down the dirt road, I felt a slight sense of relief, but it was short-lived. Just as we were nearing the edge of the forest, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Jess. "I found something," she wrote. I was looking through the old wardrobe in the living room, and I found an old photograph. It's a picture of the woman from your dreams. She's real. She went missing in these woods years ago. Some say her spirit still haunts the place, waiting for new visitors. I froze as I read the message. My heart skipped a beat. How could this be possible? How could the woman in my dreams be someone who had actually disappeared in the forest? And how had Jess found a picture of her in the cabin? I had been so sure that it was just a nightmare, a product of my overactive imagination. But now I wasn't so sure. Jess went on to tell me that the locals believed her spirit had never left the forest. It was said that she wandered the woods, drawing in anyone who dared to stay too long in that cursed place. Her dark eyes would haunt them, and her presence would cling to them even after they left. No one knew why she was waiting or what she wanted, but people had stopped going near the woods long ago. I don't know if it was a warning or just a coincidence, but I haven't been able to forget that look. The black eyes of the woman who watched me, waited for me, and followed me. If you ever find yourself looking for a quiet place to escape, beware. Some places are best left undisturbed, and some spirits, they never leave. Do you dare to listen to the dark? If tonight's tale gave you chills, let us know your thoughts in the comments. We want to hear what creeps you out and what other stories you'd love us to explore. Don't miss out on the next terrifying story. Subscribe to DTC Dark Timeless Creeps and join the family that thrives on the unknown. Tap the notification bell so you're the first to hear every spine-chilling tale. Share this video with someone brave enough to face the darkness, and let's dive deeper into the creeps that haunt our world. Comment below and become part of the terror. The darkness is calling, and we want you with us. As the darkness deepens and the stories grow more unsettling, we venture deeper into the unknown together. Each chilling tale brings us closer to the eerie truths lurking just beyond the veil of reality. The terror doesn't stop here, it only gets worse. Subscribe to DTC Dark Timeless Creeps now and stay on the edge of your seat. You won't want to miss what's lurking in the shadows next. Hit that notification bell and prepare for the next terrifying chapter. Remember, in the world of DTC, the creeps are always waiting, and they never rest. Good luck sleeping tonight.